Hello, my name is Ellen LaPlante, and I'm an attorney at Unsworth LaPlante. I'm going to be talking with you now about the basics of long-term care planning. When we talk about long-term care planning, what we're really talking about is taking care of somebody if they become disabled and can no longer handle their day-to-day affairs and need long-term care. If somebody needs long-term care, there are ways to protect their assets. So, when we think about long term care, what we're really thinking about is somebody who can't complete their activities of daily living on their own any longer. So, that could be things like eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, walking, or transferring from place to place. As a general rule, if somebody finds themselves in a position where they can no longer complete at least two activities of daily living anymore, they may be in a position of needing long term care. So, where can you get long term care? There are a variety of places where you can receive long term care services. Number one, and by far the most common place that most people would choose to receive long term care, is in their home. There's also adult daycare, which is a program if you have an elderly parent who has come to live with you and you can take care of them on days during the morning and the weekends, but they need help during the day, they can go to adult daycare. There's enhanced residential care, which often is also referred to as assisted living. This is going to be somebody moving into a facility for some help with care, but typically also maintaining some level of independence. There's a full nursing home, which is typically going to be 24/7 care. And then there's the continuing care retirement community, which is buying into a community early on and progressing there depending on your level and needs for care. So, why is long term care planning important? The average cost of a nursing home in Vermont in the year 2024 is $126,000 per year. One out of every two Americans who have reached the age of 65 will need long term care at some point in their lives. Statistically, 2.4 years is the average time spent in a nursing home. It's important to understand that that figure includes people who receive rehabilitation care, which can also be often short time. So, the typical stay in a nursing home for someone with a degenerative illness, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, something that is degenerative like that, is often 5 to 10 years. So at $126,000 per year, savings can be spent really quickly if somebody needs long-term care. There are really only five ways to pay for long-term care expenses. Number one, you can be like the guy in the picture and use all of your own money on care. Number two, you can buy long-term care insurance, which is a type of insurance that you can use to pay for long-term care insurance expenses. There's Aid and Attendance, which is a program through the VA that is an enhanced pension that can pay for care for veterans or spouses of veterans who need long-term care. And then there's Medicare and Medicaid, and these are the two government programs that can help pay for care. Really important to understand that these are two very different programs. Medicare is essentially an insurance program. If you work and you contribute to Social Security, once you turn 65, you can go on Medicare. Medicare will pay for most medical expenses. What it doesn't completely pay for is long-term care. So, in the best case scenario, Medicare will pay for 100 days of somebody's long term care expenses. After that 100 days has expired, the person finds themselves in a position where they're either privately paying for care or they turn to long term care Medicaid. Long term care Medicaid is a means tested program, which means you're only allowed to have so much money to be able to qualify for long term care Medicaid. Long term care Medicaid is a federally funded program operated at the state level. Each state has their own specific rules. These rules can be very complex, they can contain a lot of exceptions and exclusions that can affect the type of planning you do for long term care. And when we think about long-term care Medicaid, there are three facets for a person to qualify. There are assets, the amount of money that you have. There's income, the amount of money that you bring in each month. And then there's the clinical eligibility, which means your medical qualification. The clinical eligibility is determined by a nurse employed by the state of Vermont who does an evaluation to determine whether or not you need long-term care because you cannot complete those activities of daily living on your own. The income eligibility in Vermont is really complex, but what it boils down to is as long as your income does not exceed your cost of care, income is not going to be an issue for purposes of qualifying for long-term care Medicaid. So if your long-term care expenses are $10,000 a month and your income is less than $10,000 a month, your income will not preclude you from qualification. And then there's asset eligibility. And asset eligibility is really where most people have the hardest time with qualification for long-term care. And that's because Medicaid looks at available resources, and again, it's a means-tested program. In 2024, for an unmarried or individual person, you are allowed to have $2,000 in assets. A married couple is allowed to have $156,000 in assets. Either way you look at it, it's not a large sum of money that somebody is allowed to have and still be able to qualify for long-term care Medicaid. And so that's where long-term care planning can come into play. Planning ahead can allow you to protect over and above those thresholds outlined by the Medicaid department. So in Medicaid planning, there's really two steps. The first step is to immediately protect as many of your assets as possible. The tool for doing so is typically called a revocable trust. This is a trust that you can be in charge of that will protect things like your house, your cars, personal property, and these transfers can happen immediately without any look-back period before their protection. The first step also typically gives documentation to an agent for the ability to make any changes to your assets like retirement accounts if that's needed in the future. For many people, the first step in long-term care planning is enough, and that's the only tool that they really need. For others, there's a second step. And a second step of estate planning for long-term care purposes is typically subject to the 5-year look-back period. What that means is if you establish a Medicaid long-term care plan today, it would be 5 years from today before your assets would be completely protected. Typically, the second step is going to involve more advanced planning, including an irrevocable trust. And that irrevocable trust would be used to protect things like a second home or family camp, investments, cash, boats, business interests. Usually, using an irrevocable trust, we can generally protect at least 50% or more of assets on the day that you set it up. And again, after 5 years, 100% of your assets can be protected. If you're interested in meeting with an attorney to discuss long-term care planning, please contact our office at www.unsworthlaplant.com. Thank you.